Hi, welcome to this webinar on secure information sharing with the external users. My name is Kuppinger. I represent Watchful Software. I have Martin Kuppinger from KuppingerCole here with me. And first of all, thank you for joining us on this, I promise, 30 minutes webinar on a little bit of insights and information on how to address this fundamental issue, which is how are you to be able to securely share information with all the stakeholders with whom you have to, being those that are not your business partners and are not your co-workers. It's everybody out there, and do it in a secure fashion so that sensitive information remains sensitive and remains controlled in terms of who gets to do what, when, and how with that sensitive data. So this is the main focal point of this webinar. If I may ask to switch the slide. Yes, so the agenda for this webinar is, first of all, to do the introductions, 5 minutes or no more than that. Then I'll hand it over to Martin that will talk a little bit about information classification and secure information sharing becoming the standard, not being the exception anymore. And Martin will give us a very deep insight. He's a very knowledgeable person in this area. He's going to give us a very deep insight on what the market is demanding and requesting from vendors and from solutions out there. I will then give you a little bit about how RightsWATCH addresses policy-driven information sharing. How are you able to share that sensitive information in a policy-driven way so that you ensure that sensitive information remains sensitive wherever that information resides? And then at the end, we will have a Q&A session. Moving on. As I said, I have Martin Kuppinger. Martin is the CEO and founder and principal analyst of KuppingerCole, a renowned analyst firm that deals with information security amongst other subjects. And Martin was kind enough to join us on this webinar. And myself, I represent Watchful Software. I'm the director of product management. You have both of our email addresses in here. And, some of the house rules, you're muted centrally, so there's no need for you to unmute yourself, and we do this so that there's some sort of a silent background so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on. There's no need for you to record this or anyway try to capture everything that is said. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be making it available, if not today, tomorrow, at watchfulsoftware.com, and you should receive an email with details on how to watch it on demand. There's a Q&A session at the end, so feel free and please do ask all the questions, all the doubts that you have regarding what is being said. At the end, we will try and we will do our best to answer all of those questions. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Martin that will give us some insight about information sharing and collaboration. So Martin, up to you.
Okay, thank you. So let's move to the next slide, and I should be able to control it myself. Welcome at that point to everyone, and good afternoon. And so hopefully we can move to the next slide. I currently don't have the control. So the topic I will talk about, and Rui already has said it, it's about secure information sharing becoming the new standard. So secure information sharing being the approach which helps us to deal with the new challenges we are facing and being something which becomes more ubiquitous across all the organizations. So what is the reason for that? And I think we best start with looking at the organization's ground jewels. And I think they are vastly the same across all the organizations. So when we look at ground jewels, we have the brand reputation here. Brand reputation, this is about protecting our brand value, not being the number one in the headline because we have lost data, etc. The second part is customer data. So one important aspect clearly is to protect our customer data in a well thought out way. Losing customer data is tightly related to damaging brand reputation. customer data, likeliness that you have negative news and widespread negative news is high. And there are many examples of organizations which have been massively affected by losing customer data. And then there's the area of intellectual properties. And intellectual properties, I think this is a very important area as well, because intellectual properties, there has been a survey I think a while ago, but I think it's still very valid, where companies have been asked about what is the ratio of intellectual properties give on your overall corporate value, and the answer was roughly 50%. So it's sort of half of your value of your corporation, which is made up by intellectual property. So while customer data will be a little bit higher in the customer-centric, consumer-centric organizations, intellectual properties is more relevant for the manufacturing industries and for highly innovative industries. And then we have the area of people, and people are another crown jewel. So this is, you need to keep them on board, you need to keep them satisfied, you need to enable their business, but in a way that it's that it works also for what you need to do, so that you're able to be that you're able to allow them communicating in a way which is appropriate to them. And when we look at this, so we can move to the next slide, a lot of things have changed here. And one of the fundamental changes really in this entire businesses we have is that everything and everyone become connected. So our IT is not something which is inward facing and internal anymore. It's something which connects organizations with people, not only the employees, but the consumers, the business partners. And all of them have devices. They use multiple devices to communicate back. They have things. We have a far more complex environment of information sharing. And when we want to share information in such a complex environment, we also need to be able to keep control about it. And that means that we have to reflect this change. And I think with the next two slides, I can make clear what a fundamental change is. So when we look at the reality, some 10 years ago, we had an internal network with our security perimeter, some gateway, a few mobile workers, maybe a few hackers out there, a little bit of internet, but most communication and most of the things we did happened internally. Right now, things have changed fundamentally. Our corporate network now looks very different. It's spread across the cloud. We have clearly all that's something we had before, offices connected. We might have partially remote data centers. Most of the users are mobile, using a multitude of devices. And we are communicating far more with other parties, such as our suppliers, such as other types of business partners. And when we work in this environment, we need to be able to securely communicate and securely distribute information across these environments. So what we have is a paradigm shift in information security, a shift from the perimeter-centric security towards the defense of internal resources. And this is something which is then tightly related to this entire field of secure information sharing and all the technologies such as rights management services and so on. So we are in a world where we don't have the network perimeter anymore in the way we had it before. We have a situation where perimeter defense security tools leave too many gaps for what is today commonly called APTs, so advanced persistent threats. So they can't protect for a lot of things. And we need to understand that a lot of things have changed, so we need to assume hacks already have happened. We need to try to detect them as much as possible. And we need to know as much as possible about our assets. This is the key, and not only that, and this is what leads back to secure information sharing. We not only need to understand what are our key assets, and information, intellectual properties is one of these key assets. I talked about the crown jewels before. And so we need to understand how to protect these assets. So the what, where, and when of information protection today has fundamentally changed. It's not about setting up a firewall as the first line or the only line of defense. It's building up a layered approach, and we have to start looking at what is at the center. And at the center is what we really want to protect. And what do we really want to protect? Oh, another firewall, another network cable. We want to protect information. So the what, where, and when of information protection is when we look at the what, structured data and unstructured data. And unstructured data, that's document. And the part of unstructured data is one of the clearly most interesting and most challenging parts. And we need to protect it everywhere, regardless of the device, regardless where it resides or flows. We need to protect it everywhere. And we need to protect it at any time. At rest, so when it's stored somewhere at the server. In motion, so when it's flowing across the network, when it's sent as an email attachment, whatever. And in use. So we need to have a consistent protection of our information. And that's where we should start, because at the core of our information security challenge is information. Notably, information security is the term which is information security. And it's the I and the S, not the T in. So IT is information technology, but information security is about securing information, not securing technology, about the I and not the T in IT. That's what we should keep in mind. And so that's where we should start. So rights management is not new here. It's something which is out for a pretty long time. So I'm following this market for more than 12 years right now. And even then, there were some approaches out. So there were a number of challenges, however, for many years, which led to a relatively slow adoption of that type of technologies. And one of the major ones was application and document format support. So unless you're able to support all the applications you need, all the documents which you use to hold sensitive and critical and valuable information, unless you are not able to support all of them, you have a challenge. The platform support has been a challenge. So something which works on Windows only, or if you go back to application which works on PDF or Word only, is not sufficient. So, and particularly these days when you have mobile users, a multitude of devices, many people using Macs, but many are still using Windows and some using Linux. You need to understand. External user support, the main topic of today, major challenge. And when we look back at the things I brought up, everything and everyone become connected. One of these elements is external user support is key to success. You need to be able to support your external users perfectly well, because these are the ones where you're changing your information. And but even for internals, when they are mobile, information is leaving your perimeter. But for external users, very obviously, it's an even bigger challenge. Classification, partially automated classification. Deployment has been one of the challenges. So when I go back to the early days of some of the systems, deployment was definitely very challenging. Vendor focus and choice. So many vendors weren't really focused on the topic. It was more a side topic. Today, things have changed. So people think about, oh, are my keys really 100% secure? So it's more a very specific type of problem right now, not the very generic ones we had yesterday. It's a very specific problem. Cloud versus on-premise. That's one of the things people discuss a lot when talking about it. The classification scheme. So how do we classify? Not can we classify, but how to do it best, which is a different level of challenge, but not this fundamental one we had before. How to deal with many policies. And a lot of details, breadth of support, implementation, administration, and sometimes also how do I combine best this, or how do I build this entire network best? So I have my infrastructure building blocks and add-ons. So how many add-ons can I really handle, and so what is the best way to mix my environment? So these challenges have really changed, and they have moved from the very fundamental things, so can I do it at all, towards more the detailed things, how do I do it best? That means we are far more mature than we have been before, and we are today, from my perspective, at a level where we can use rights management where it's mature enough and where we must start using it because we need to protect our crown jewels. And without technologies which protect information across their entire life cycle, we will not succeed in this challenge. So let's move forward. Another, I think, very interesting point here is what I call the awareness challenge. The funny thing is that a lot of stuff this challenge has changed. So when I go back some years, some IT people were aware of what we could do, but people outside of IT weren't really interested. Today we have on the positive side that the C-level is very much aware of the need for secure information sharing and information protection. That is something they demand from their information security and in consequence to implement it technically from their IT departments. They want to have it. Regardless of how it is done, they want to protect sensitive information at any time, everywhere, etc. The interesting point is that a lot of IT people I talk with, these are not aware of that we have the type of technology such as rights management, so overall the secure information sharing technologies. So many rely more on, I would say, insecure technologies of just sharing but not securing, in particular not across the entire life cycle. And clearly there are some people who started with these technologies rather early and have sort of a little bit of negative experience from their past. But this has changed, and I think right now we have a good situation because there's the demand, and what I talked about before, if you look at the technologies, there's supply. So secure information sharing today, it's about available, mature, and we don't have alternatives. Available means, in fact, we have multiple vendors and we have many partners, in particular in the broader Microsoft RMS plus partner space. We have major problems solved, and there's no other way than using that type of technologies to really protect at least the unstructured document part of your crown jewels, which is a vast part of what you need to protect. So it's mandatory that we move forward on that. And this is basically the storyline I want to bring to you. With that, I would hand over to Rui for his part on policy-driven information sharing with RightsWATCH.
Sure. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for their insights. And honestly, what I do take out of you, what you just said, amongst other things, is that, secure information sharing is really under in the scrutiny. I mean, C-levels execs, they want it. IT needs to provide for that. There are multiple alternatives out there. And there needs to be ways in which you can secure collaboration. You can collaborate in a secure fashion without compromising on who gets to do what, when, and how sensitive that information is, and who should be handling that information and when, etc. Outside of network defenses and traditional defenses that have been around for several years. As RightsWATCH and as Watchful Software, we are a vendor and we operate in this realm, of course. And besides, giving you or on top of giving you some insights on how we address it and how RightsWATCH addresses this problem, first of all, I want to share with you some of the concerns, some of the questions that we're being asked by CISOs and the likes when we talk about and we debate about secure collaboration sharing. And first and foremost, one of the questions that we are asked is, can I enforce corporate policies? So, the problem being, there are a multitude of ways that you can collaborate. Are there ways in which you can collaborate in a secure fashion, but you need to enforce, but enforcing corporate policy? So instead of the user deciding when and how he's going to share that file with whomever, corporate decides how that user is going to share that file and what can the other person receiving that file by any means, shape, or form will be able to do with that information. So that is the first question. The second question, if I may, is, can I allow it? to be done via any media and not just email. So I mean, email is the traditional way that we all have, right, to share information back and forward is present everywhere. But can I go outside of that? Can I use any means to exchange information back and forward in order to secure collaborate with the external user? I mean, can I use a USB key? Can I use Bluetooth? Can I use email? Of course, can I use content sharing? Can I use secure file sharing? Can I use, this, that, and the other, whatever other types of technologies and approaches that you can think of? This is also a question that CISOs poses to RightsWATCH every single time. Point number 3 is, can I make it so that I don't need to ask my users to click a bunch of or a set of extra clicks and go outside their workflow in order to do that? Can I make it, I dare to say, stupidly easy for any user in my organization to do that? Can I do that? I mean, so I need to enforce corporate policies. I need to make it available outside of the boundaries of email communication. I need to make it as easy as possible so that I don't have to teach users, complex workflows, etc., and combo boxes and stuff like that in order for them to allow them to do that secure collaboration. Point number 4, in this case, the one thing I do not need is to have to manage those external users into my systems, manage usernames and passwords and the whole 9 yards. I don't want to do that. So I want this to happen, but I don't want the overhead so that my IT guys or whomever is dealing with my systems has to onboard those external users. And this is key to understand, some of the challenges for secure collaboration. So point number 5 is, I must not require those external users neither to own a license of, a software that I'm running or, have a dedicated app or a dedicated container or a dedicated something that inside that app or inside that container, they are able, them being those users, those external users, are then able to handle that file. So I must make it in a way that it is seamless for the user, is seamless for them. They don't have to go into buying software or having license or downloading plugins or downloading apps or something like that. That's really not the way the CISOs want it to happen. And last but definitely not least, can I know then who did what, when, and how? Can I control and have an information tracking, so to speak, so that if something happens, I'm in good solid legal grounds to understand who did what, when, and how, who was the person that shared that information and what was done with it, etc., etc., etc. Amongst other things, these are the 6 questions that we are typically being asked by CISOs. So secure information sharing, if I may, is all about applying some set of governance, some set of policies, information control policies, information classification policies, some set of policies that if you have them, great, let's apply them. If you don't have them, let's make sure that you can build and start building those governance models. So one thing that secure information sharing is applying a governance model in real life. It's not just something that sits on a shelf, 400 pages long, well written by a consultancy company, but no one has ever written, no one read it, no one knows that exists except the usual suspect, which is the CISO. Classification is, okay, not only do I need to apply the governance model, I also need to know what information I need to secure. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I have 25,000 different pieces of information in my laptop. Not all of them are sensitive in nature, and I need to distinguish between what needs to be secured and what needs not to be secured. So what doesn't care, what the company does not care, and that comes with classification, labeling, tagging, tooltips, policy tips, so that you can apply a governance model in that sense. But you can educate and make users aware of what is going on. So you can make users aware of what is happening in that sense, and you can apply that governance model by means of a classification policy that is applied. Loss prevention in the bottom means typically what is known as DLP, of course, but other approaches, simpler approaches of a DLP. If you will, something like a DLP light approach into it. Bits and bytes of a DLP that will make it so that you can really control what is going on. Protection on the right is the rights management part of it, is how do you enforce those rights. So moving on to what secure information sharing is, if you want, in a nutshell, governance is all about enhancing compliance. Classification is all about decreasing corporate liability. Loss prevention is how do you apply those policies, and protection, aka rights management, is how do you uphold those policies if and when those files are shared with whomever and wherever they are. As Martin has said, it's not a question of controlling the information when it resides, in a corporate server or when it resides in a corporate managed app or device or something like that. It's wherever that information is, you need to control it in a secure fashion. And if you put all these four things together, what we're saying is that secure information sharing is really RightsWATCH, is really what RightsWATCH is all about. So moving on to the next slide, what you have is now how does RightsWATCH, and I promise this is the last slide that we have to show you even before we go to the Q&A, when you move into the RightsWATCH area, how can RightsWATCH answer each and every single one of those 6 questions that we posed initially? RightsWATCH can really enforce corporate policies so that you do not rely on users to know, understand, reason with, or be willing to apply policies to data. Make no mistakes, most users, or the majority of users, are well-meant users. They mean you no harm. They are not malicious in any way, shape, or form. But they do mistakes, and guess what? They don't know how to protect and secure collaboration in a secure fashion and collaborate with that data. So you need to tell them how, make them understand, make them reason over, and make them say, look, you don't even have to be willing, because policy-driven engines can do that for you. But you teach and you understand what is going on. Point number 2, it allows data to be shared by any media and still uphold corporate policies. So it's not just about, vanilla-like RMS type of approaches, which is, push a button, creates an email, and then, on the email container, I'm able to control stuff, etc. It's all about, what if I want to use Dropbox? What if I want to use OneDrive? What if I want to use a USB stick in order to collaborate with another guy? What if I just want to send a file from my mobile device to the other guy via Bluetooth or something like that? It's really that type of enhancing the sphere, enhancing the media list that you have available for you in order to make this happen. Point number 3 is, it does not impact on users' workflow. It does not demand users to click on any extra buttons, pop-ups, or combo boxes. Because, let's face it, if you ask users to click on pop-ups over pop-ups and combo boxes, and, as thorough as those can be, they will be cumbersome. And the user will, guess what? Default into the easiest route possible, which is do nothing. If you ask your users to click a bunch of extra buttons in order to do that, that will not work. RightsWATCH simplifies that with an interface which is pretty much the standard in terms of how easy of use it is to do. It does not require, when you're dealing with external users, companies to onboard nor manage those external users' identity, because we're leveraging the cloud, because we're leveraging Azure for that. There's no need for RightsWATCH or a company running RightsWATCH to be, onboarding users into Active Directory and grant them usernames and passwords and manage those, etc., and all that overhead. That's not to do with RightsWATCH. So the external users dilemma with RightsWATCH also simplifies that in that way. There's no need for the external user to buy or install any RightsWATCH proprietary software. Absolutely not, because we're also leveraging that Azure and the Microsoft ecosystem in this space. All those traditional Office apps, even being it in mobiles or whatnot, will do that for you. And it delivers a comprehensive audit trail that enables you to leverage, for example, a SIEM tool like Splunk, ArcSight, QRadar, Logarithm, or whatever, in order to do that data analysis, and the ability for you to understand who did what, when, and how, so that you know what happened and why it happened. This was pretty much what we had to show you, and the next slide is basically, open up the floor for a Q&A session. I hope that we do have one or two, at least we do have time for one or two questions. So let me look into the chat. Oh, Martin, I think I have one for you. So the question is, Martin talked about the challenges of rights management, and I'm wondering if the interoperability between systems is better addressed now. Martin, do you want to take that?
Yes, thank you, Rui, and I think it's a great question. We can tackle this from two angles because interoperability is a broad term. So one clearly is interoperability with all the systems which you use to handle the information and documents, create documents, etc. I think this is well solved. The other part is all the various options you have in the rights management market. And what we really see here is that we have an increasingly one dominant player with a broad set of partners. So Microsoft and RightsWATCH also is one of the partners. And so this is what we see as sort of the core of the market, with some of the formerly very prominent players not being that active in the market anymore, and a number of smaller options with various strengths and then sort of specific positioning in the market. So this is what I see. So what we don't have is sort of the standard for that every tool can use a standard API for accessing that, but overall interoperability has become far better, and we see a good network in particular around the Microsoft world. Does this answer your question?
I guess so.
Okay.
Thank you for that. We do have one or two more questions, so let me see what we have here. There's another one for you. I guess you can take this one, Martin. It reads something like, Martin talked about enterprise data itself being the last line of defense. Is this the new approach? Is this new approach, better yet, mutually exclusive with whatever companies already have in place, like those network-centric security stuff, etc.?
So getting rid of the firewall or getting rid of your Windows Server access control settings by just relying on rights management. It would be the ideal world, so to speak. So if you do rights management perfect, theoretically yes, but then practically seen no. So practically seen, I'm a big believer in a layered security approach. Where you start with protecting what you really need to protect, which is the information, and where you add other layers. So firewalls are great as a baseline defense, filtering out a lot of noise. They are not sufficient to solve all of your challenges. So it's not that you get rid of all the other stuff, but I think you should start concentrating on what you really want to protect, and then complement it with additional technologies, also for additional use cases, scenarios, etc.
We have another question that was asked by John. It was asking, how RightsWatch compares with FAZU. I can take that one. FAZU is a very comprehensive solution in order to do rights management. I know a little bit about FAZU, but basically RightsWatch is not in that realm, in the sense it's not competing with FAZU. So RightsWatch is purely a data classification solution that has a very strong policy-driven engine behind it, and it applies, to your emails. It applies to your, to typical productivity files, but it can also extend that to mobile devices and other OSs, and even other file types, and even content managers, etc. But RightsWatch does leverage Microsoft Rights Management technology as the de facto policy enforcer, and not the FAZU flavor of the rights of information rights management. So in that sense, FAZU is really competing with rights management, and not in the sense that they have different standards for information rights management. RightsWatch leverages the de facto standard that we believe is the de facto standard in the market for information rights management, which is Microsoft's rights management, the on-premises flavor of it or the Azure flavor of it. But in a nutshell, if you want to position RightsWatch, we're pretty much a very strong and powerful, I dare to say, data classification tool. There's only one more question, and I believe this is an interesting one, so let me just take this one. It has to do with how does RightsWatch differ with secure file sharing type of approaches. So the fact that you have a collaboration device or a collaboration app or repository, and you place a file that you want to share with other people inside that repository, and by means of placing it there, it inherits a certain policy, and then if someone extracts that file from there, in certain cases they will have some rights management or some sort of policies applied, or if the file resides inside that container, they will have policies applied. It's a different approach, honestly. It's a different approach to the same problem. Are they mutually completely exclusive? Not really. I mean, honestly, can you do secure file sharing with emails? You really cannot, right? So basically, you can use RightsWATCH with or without rights management to do this, to do certain use cases, and RightsWATCH will not address the entire set of use cases in your company, but it will help you get there. The same way that secure file sharing, whatever flavor that you have for that, will do the exact same thing. So without anything, and I'm sorry for any other questions that may be asking. We will thank you for joining us. We really don't want to go extremely over the time that we had allocated. Thank you very much, Martin, for all your help. And
thank you.
And we will be placing this or posting this webinar for you to watch it on demand on watchfulsoftware.com today or tomorrow. Thank you very much.